All right, so again, thanks folks for joining. Today we're going to turn our attention to what's new in Tableau. We are joined by Phil D'Amico, who is a lead consultant from Tableau, focusing on the partner channel. So thank you, Phil, for joining us. So a little bit of Ironside background up front. We're going to do some the intros of the panelists, and then turn it over to Phil, and then at the end do some Q&A. So Phil, why don't you move ahead one slide? All right, so this is just a calendar of future events. Again, this is on our website. If you have any questions, you can send them to that here to help@ironsidegroup.com email address. Move ahead one. Thanks. So this is our mantra, right? So Ironside's reason for being is to help our clients use data to make better decisions about their business. Next slide, Phil. All right, and then, this is just a quick holistic overview of Ironside's capabilities. For those who don't know, we at Ironside feel that data and analytics are critical for decision-making in any organization, especially now. When deploying or enhancing analytic capability, we at Ironside see these 6 areas at the center of this wheel as critical to any successful implementation. This model is meant to outline how Ironside can assist any organization with all of these steps, no matter where you are on the journey. So first, we offer advisory services both at the strategic and tactical level. We can help you with the design of your technical architecture, your data structures, or your analytic interfaces using design thinking. We have deep experience in building all manner of analytics, be it data, AI, machine learning, dashboards, or reporting, both on-prem and in the cloud, and across a range of prominent vendor technologies. We can help you deploy, upgrade, and migrate your analytics ecosystem. We can help you manage your data and content to ensure it is well governed and provides a single view. And finally, we offer data science as a service, managed platform services, and flexible application support, so you can focus on innovation and generating business value from data. So with that, move ahead one slide and do intro. So Phil, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Phil D'Amico. I'm a lead solution engineer for Tableau. And as it mentions here, I focus specifically on partners. So I support both you and companies such as Ironside, making sure that you understand Tableau to the best of my ability, and also to support you in all your Tableau work.
Sorry, I'm Ryan Bowen. I'm a consultant in Ironside. I've worked primarily within the BI and advisory space over the past 3 years, working primarily with Cognos and Tableau, doing large-scale report migrations, dashboard design, and Tableau Online and Server enterprise deployments.
Thanks, Ryan. And then finally, myself, Scott Masage. I'm the practice director for BI at Ironside. So with that, I'll turn it over to Phil.
Terrific. Thank you, Scott.
You got it.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Again, my name is Phil D'Amico. I'm a lead solution engineer in our partner organization here at Tableau. And for the next 20 minutes or so, what I want to do is walk you through the latest features in 2020.1. Those of you that are familiar with Tableau know that we are pretty strict with a quarterly release of our products. And in fact, as a matter of fact, we're already in beta with 2020.2. But I wanted to highlight some of the major features in the time that we have. And then at the end, I have a link to resources where you can get more information. You can get a full description of all of these features. But I think it's worth spending a few moments just to talk about the major features in 2020.1. I've divided this presentation into really two parts. There is what I consider to be the most important features that your users or your users will see, will have the most impact on the users and consumers, whether you're in desktop or server or online. And then on the second part is the back end. I'm going to highlight what's new for IT and administrators. I'll talk a little bit about Tableau Prep, and then I will talk about some of the new features in our add-ons, the data management and the server management add-ons. So in the interest of time, let's start with the front end. These, as I mentioned, these are the features that have the most impact on your users and the consumers of Tableau dashboards and reports. We're going to start with what I think is probably the most, and in fact I know is the most requested feature we've ever had in our Tableau community online. As you know, we have a very vibrant Tableau community, and you can go online and submit ideas, and you can vote for other ideas. And this was one of the most requested features in our history. It's dynamic parameters. And what dynamic parameters do is they allow you, those of you that design dashboards and workbooks, you know that parameters are a very valuable feature that allow you to really enhance the interactivity of workbooks. They allow you to have user-defined controls over everything on a workbook, from the metric you want to see, to reference lines, to all sorts of other things. And in the past, those parameters were fairly fixed. When you built the workbook, you created the list of parameters, and then when if that parameter relied on a data source, let's say, and needed to be updated each time the data changed, workbook authors had to go in and download that workbook, refresh the list of values, and then republish that workbook, which it seems like a lot of work for having to do that every time the data changed. So there are two things that we do with dynamic parameters. We allow you to source a parameter, not just from a fixed set of values, which you can still do, but also from a dynamic list that you can source, that you can have come up every time the person opens the workbook. The other thing that we've done with dynamic parameters is we've allowed you to set a default value based on a calculation. Rather than having a fixed default value, you can set that based on a calculation. And I'll just show you quickly how that looks in a Tableau desktop when you're actually building the parameter. So if you notice, I've got a dialog here of a parameter in 2019.4, and I'm going to show you a workbook that uses this parameter. And this parameter is a date field that will drive a reference line on my workbook. So in the past, I had to go in, set that parameter, and I could add those values from a field, but every time that field was updated, I needed to go back and refresh that list of values. On the right is 2020.1. The dialog is essentially the same, but we've added two new capabilities. The first one is, what calculation or what value would you like to set as the default when the workbook opens? And the second one is, when that workbook opens, which column or calculation would you like to read to get a list of values? So let me show you what that looks like in Tableau Desktop. So I'm going to open Tableau Desktop here, and I have my dynamic parameters, and you'll get a little preview of another feature here when I open it. And if you notice on the right-hand side here, if I can move there we go, I can move this. If you notice here, I have a parameter that's controlling a reference line here. And I tried to make this as simple as possible so that you could see what was happening. And if you notice here, I have a title that says, the latest date that's in this parameter list is 12/29/2015, and that's the date that's driving this reference line. Now I have a parameter where I can pick a date, I can change that date, that reference line if I want to. But when the data is updated, I'm going to have new data here, and I want that reference line to always be the latest date that's in my source system or my warehouse. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simulate adding new data here. So if you remember, my latest value was 12/29/2015. So if I close that and then flip back to my source and say, let me just update the warehouse. Let me just update the values here. I'm going to add 3 more months. And if I go down to the bottom here, I'm all the way up to March. Save that, go back here, load my values, load my dynamic parameters. And you notice now that not only is the parameter updated, but the reference line is updated as well. So I've done 2 things with that particular feature that's enabled me to do 2 things: update my workbook dynamically so that I don't have to download that workbook and republish it every time the data changes, and also give that person a default value when they load that workbook. So those of you, if you are authors, even if you're a consumer, this opens up a whole new range of possibilities for what you can do and how you can control interactivity in your workbook. So that's dynamic parameters. The second one is, second new feature I think has the most impact on people is visual animations. What this does is we have introduced a feature that you can control. You can turn on or off at your discretion. That what happens is that every time you make a change to your visualization, we can have those changes dynamically show on the screen. So you can see, if you notice here in the example, and I'll show you another simple example in a moment, but as you see, anytime this person makes a change, whether he selects a new filter, he changes a parameter, it's going to change that visualization, and you can control exactly how those animations happen. What may look like eye candy in the beginning is actually can be a very powerful feature if you're telling a story, or you're using the pages feature in Tableau desktop and server to dynamically play through an animation. So play through something that happens over time, for example, and you can see all of the animations that result. This is especially effective with bullet charts. Any of you with scatter plots. Any of you that maybe have seen Hans Rosling talk about the health and show his dynamic presentation over time, you'll see that was really the inspiration for the visual animations that we've offered in Tableau. We think that helps people not only truly see potentially changes in their data and really understand the impact, but also allows you to tell pretty powerful stories using our story feature. So those are available on dashboards in desktop. You can tell stories with them using our story feature, and they're also available in Tableau online. And let me just show you an example of that. I'm going to close this. Again, I tried to keep this very simple so that you would see you could see the impact here. Let me just launch the Viz animations. And if you notice here right away, the Viz animations are every time I load that chart, I get the animations. Again, you might think of it as eye candy. I think of it as being a powerful way to understand the impact of changes in your data. So for example, if I go over here and remove the tables value here, I can see pretty clearly what's going on. So if I add it back in again, I can see, and in this case, the animation is happening fairly slowly. And I did that so that you could see it on a webinar. You can control exactly how quickly those animations occur. And I'll show you in a moment, but let me just remove chairs here and give you an idea. So you notice how everything, not only does chairs get removed, but everything else obviously gets updated as well. So it happens when I change a filter. It happens when I sort. So you have an understanding of where things go when you sort. And it also happens on all chart types. So if I go here to my line chart, and I can see, for example, that tables, I might see that how tables makes up a significant portion of this category, because when I add it or remove it, it significantly changes that line, whereas everything else stays the same, but because I'm looking at things by category in this case. So hopefully that's a couple of simple examples, and we have, as you can imagine, workbooks, but if you combine dynamic and default parameters with workbooks, with the play button that's now available in the browser, you can tell pretty powerful stories, and you can gain a lot of insight by doing very simple things with our workbooks. So that's Viz animations. The third feature that I think has the most impact on our end users is buffer calculations. If you do any sort of map analysis or geospatial analysis, you know that we introduced some new features a few releases back that allows you to fairly easily create points on maps based on latitude and longitude. What's called make point and make line. What we've gotten from our customers is that, yes, that's really good that I can do that, but a lot of my analysis involves understanding what's around those points. And so they would go through very complex calculations in Tableau to build what you're seeing on the screen here, to build those circles around a point. What we've done in 2020.1 is introduce the buffer calculation, which is very simple. It says, give me a point on your map, which in this case is the geometry column. Tell me how big you want to make the circle around it, and then give me a unit of measure. So in this case, you have, I have a point on a map, and I want to know everything within 5 miles of that point. And Tableau will draw that circle that you see there. So if you think about how much easier that is to do and the types of visualizations and analysis that you can offer your customers based on what is really a simple calculation, it can be very powerful. So what we found is that people can use that calculation together with dynamic parameters, together with parameters and values to really say, let's say you had a parameter that said you can change how big you want to make that circle. So you just increase or decrease that circle dynamically with a parameter, and that calculation or that value is fed to this formula, and you have a very dynamic map that allows you to understand proximity. And for example, one example I saw was a hotel chain that might want to understand how many Airbnbs there are within a certain proximity of their locations. So they may have 2 data sources, a list of Airbnbs and a list of their hotels. And using this buffer calculation, you can join that data, and you can perform very, very dynamic and powerful analysis using the buffer feature. So this just gives you a couple of ideas about how this can be very powerful. The next thing that we've done, which I think will have an impact on some of your use cases, is we have released our Python integration server, which we call TabPy. We've improved that and made it a Tableau, officially Tableau supported product. In the past, TabPy has been an open source product that was developed by Tableau engineers, but was not fully supported by Tableau. And this was a problem with some of our customers who have specific guidelines that say we don't put open source projects into production. So many of our users and customers didn't get the benefit of the Python integration. And for those of you that don't know, what TabPy allows you to do is it allows you to integrate Python scripts with your Tableau workbooks. So specifically, you can call functions in Python. Let's say you've written an entire data modeling or modeling environment in a statistical environment in Python, and you want your Tableau workbooks to benefit from the results of that model or those statistics. You can do that using our Python integration server. So we fully support that product now. It's a much simpler install. In the past, it needed to be installed inside a virtual machine, essentially inside your Windows desktop. Now we've made that a separate install. All you need is a specific version of Python to be able to run it. We've added user authentication, so you can limit the users that can benefit from Tableau, the Python integration server. We've enhanced it with an SSL layer so that, again, that could be supported in environments where everything has to be hardened. And then we've also included some pre-built statistical models, specifically ANOVA and some sentiment analysis packages in Tableau or in Python that allow you to get out of the gate, do some very sophisticated things with Tableau, and it really extend Tableau to support some very sophisticated statistical models. So that's it for the front end. And now I'm going to walk through, in the time we have, I'm going to walk through some of the back end features that I think are most relevant for IT and administrators. A big feature for IT and administrators is login-based license management. Those of you that, if you manage large numbers of users or even a small number of users of Tableau Desktop and you have a server environment, you know that you've had to maintain separate keys. You had keys for your server, and you had individual keys for your creators, for those that use Tableau Desktop and Tableau Prep. What we've introduced in 2020.1 is now your creators can activate their version of desktop or prep simply by logging into your Tableau server with their credentials. And what that does is that assigns them that key. They now have that key available to them in desktop and publisher. You don't have to distribute keys manually anymore, and those keys can be tracked on the server. So we've added administrative views to the server so that server and site administrators can go in and see who has what keys. We think that dramatically simplifies the process. It makes it much easier for you and frankly for Tableau to be able to manage those keys, those creator keys centrally versus having to deploy separate keys for each individual user. That is available in 2020.1. You need to have a 2020.1 server to enable that, and you need to have the latest versions of desktop and prep to enable it as well. So if you have an environment where you want to look at this feature, you should talk to your account rep because, or to Scott, because that feature needs to be enabled on your version of server. It's something that has to happen. Tableau makes a license change on our side, and then you're enabled with that on your side. And so there's a process that you have to go through. But we think that's a really powerful feature for administrators and managing even small groups of people. Second one is setting permissions for nested projects. If you manage a large implementation of Tableau server, you know that in the past, there have been some limits on the ways you can manage permissions. Specifically, when you create a top level project, you can either lock the permissions, which means that no individuals can make changes to permissions, which most people do, so that they can manage them with groups and users and permissions. But that once you locked it, any nested project that you had inside that had the same permissions. And that was a real limitation for a lot of people. So what we've done in 2020.1 is we've allowed you to have nested projects, that is sub-projects within the top level, to have a different permission structure than the top level project. So if you can imagine an environment where one very large customer of ours wanted to create a project for each user. So they had a top level project for every user, which means that every time somebody was going into Tableau server, they had to scan through 1,500 top level projects. And that was really, really cumbersome. So what they did with 2021.1 is they built a single project called users at the top. And then within that top level project, each individual project was only assigned an individual user. So it allows you to have a much more sophisticated content and permission structure inside your Tableau server. We've also done a couple of things where we've improved the site role allocation limits for Tableau server. So now those can be managed by site administrators. They don't have to be managed by the server administrators. We've made some dramatic improvements, as you can imagine, to our Salesforce connector. We've updated it significantly. So if you're using our Salesforce connector, you'll find that the performance is significantly improved. There are some technical reasons for that, which we can go into later. But the top line is that the Salesforce connector is dramatically improved. We've added support for their SQL language. So that you're similar to custom SQL that you do with Tableau, you can now write custom SQL into Salesforce. So we've also added a few data objects. I believe campaign history and activity history we've added as objects, predefined objects you can pull into Salesforce.
So Phil, why don't we pause there and see if we can open it up for questions. So
sure.
Thank you, Phil. So if you have a question, why don't you go ahead and just enter it into the question window, and we'll get them answered. Okay, so first question, does the new license management work with core licensing, with the core license model?
It does, and will that's a very good question, and I'm going to have to get back to you on specifically how that works. I know there are some limitations in the types of server environments that where you can enable login-based license management. So, and it gets very tricky. But Scott, I'm going to have to follow up with you on the more details on that.
Okay. All right. Another question. Did Tableau make any updates to setting default pages for Tableau Online? So, for example, setting default pages for groups. Ryan.
Yep. Yeah, the
Yeah,
short
I can
answer
touch on that. I've actually gotten that before, Phil. But yeah, no, right now you can't. I know site administrators want to be able to do that for certain groups, but at this point, you're going to have to ask those individual users within your groups to set it to a specific page that you probably want them to. But no, not for entire groups, unfortunately.
Okay. Another question, and maybe Phil, can you give some examples of what the new permission roles are?
Yes, we did improve the permission. Do you mean sort of the predefined roles? When you set permissions, you can set them with predefined roles, and that sets the individual permissions to a set of default values. I'm not sure exactly what is new, to be honest. Did you want to get that right?
Yeah, there's a few. There's a few they changed. There used to be an interactor and a connector role, but now it seems like they're more aligned with the site roles when it comes to like viewer, creator, and explorer, because now those templatized roles within the permissions within the folders or the projects, it's viewer, explorer, publisher, and so it seems more obvious to admins when they're aligning these groups with certain permissions.
Okay. Terrific. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, guys. All right. So I think we've got time for one last question here. So the question is, we struggle on a regular basis with deploying content from environment to environment. Typically that's involving the use of Tableau desktop to move content back and forth. Is there anything in the server management add-on that might help us there?
Yeah, the server management add-on, I think people might want to take a look at that, because it sounds, server management sounds like you're sort of monitoring what's going on in the server, but actually we've included with that a content migration tool. And that gives you a lot of flexibility to set up plans where if you on a regular basis migrate, let's say from dev to test to prod with projects in your folder, in your Tableau server, or even from site to site, or even from one server to another as part of your regular process, we have a tool called the Content Migration Tool that allows you to set up plans and run those plans either on a scheduled basis. You can control it from command line, or you can run them interactively. So I think if you're looking for a content migration tool, that's definitely something you should look at with our server management add-on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Phil. And okay, so we're a minute over here. So thank you very much, Phil, for joining us, and thank you for everyone who attended. And just a reminder that Ironside is doing these Take30s 3 days a week. Tuesdays are data science, Wednesdays data integration, and then Thursdays are BI. The next BI topic is an introduction to Amazon QuickSight, which is Amazon's BI tool. So again, thank you very much. If you have any comments or questions, please send them to here2help@ironsidegroup.com, and enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy your Friday, enjoy the weekend, and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody.